To breed or not to breed? This has to be one of the biggest, most life-changing questions that any of us ever answer. And it's a decision that I don't think most people ever feel fully equipped to make. And it's not a conversation that a lot of people have out loud. I think there's a thought that plants itself that some people for a year or 5 years or 10 years or 15 years ask themselves the question all the time, but you don't.
Isn't it something that you talk about constantly with your friends?
No.
That's weird to me. What's wrong with you people?
I don't think so. I think because you're worried that some of your concerns will make you sound selfish or vacuous.
It's still a little bit taboo for a woman to say, I don't want to have kids. It shouldn't be, but I'm saying that it's...
But I don't think it's taboo. Like I feel like lots of people in my were like, should we have kids? Is it now? Like not? Like then? Like I feel like that's a constant conversation.
But to have the question, do I want them at all?
Not.
Or do I not want them at all? Especially with your mates who have kids. That's where it gets really complicated.
So true.
And the reason this has come up again for me is because I listened to an episode of the Imperfects last week, and Ryan Shelton, who's a comedian and podcast host, talked about this in a way that had me and a few friends crying in recognition. We just went...
Like actually crying?
Absolutely. There are a few things he said that I went, that's it. Like that's what... And this is my central crisis at this point in my life, and all of my friends. Myself and my friends have entered this life stage, right? That you get to, say, your early, your mid-30s. I think Ryan Shelton's closer to 40-ish. But what happens is
his girlfriend's younger though.
Yes. You design your life in a particular way. You hopefully have some job stability. You're probably renting. Hopefully you like the people you're renting with. You go to cafes. You do your exercise. Things are looking
time is your own, friend.
fucking good.
Time is your own. You go on holiday.
You go on holiday. You save your money for yourself. And then all of a sudden it's like time to blow it all up with kids. And it's the impossible decision. Shelton said it perfectly by saying that it is the only decision he can think about that is entirely irreversible. You can't write a pros and cons list.
Although
you could adopt them out.
I was going to say something unpopular. I was going to say, I know a lot of men who seem to think they can reverse it because it gets hard. They just fuck off.
That's actually not a bad point. That is not a bad point.
They leave the women with the children and the mess.
Some women do that too.
And of course they do.
Very
few.
I know.
I know lots of men who do that.
Who have decided they want to be a dad.
But I'm sorry to everybody.
No, it's true. You can't write a pros and cons list because while we can see the cons, the pros are inaccessible until you have experienced it.
So true.
Right? Mm-hmm. And as far as decisions go, final, permanent, it's just insurmountable. And what people are afraid of, and this is what makes a decision different as well, is that you're terrified that you will get to an age where the decision has been taken away from you, which is inevitable, and you'll regret it. The concern for a lot of people is, should I just have them so I don't find myself at 50, at 60, at 70 regretting it?
Some people do.
Yeah, and some people do and some people don't.
Yeah.
And as my TikTok will tell me constantly, some people regret having the kids.
So
no, but that's what I mean. Some
yes.
people regret having the kids. I've heard that a lot. Yeah,
Some days you really regret having children.
I think you
Other
regret
days,
it. Yeah,
not so much.
You regret it. I think there are days you regret it. But, well, I can't speak for anyone but myself. But overall, on balance, I had a very different reaction to listening to this podcast. I listened to it because
I sent it. My sister sent it. Yeah,
and I do love their show. But I just was shouting, and I actually text Ryan afterwards because he's been on No Filter, and I really like Ryan. Get the splinters out of your ass. Having kids makes your life bigger. Why would you not want your life to be bigger?
Don't you think, though, and this is what he says. He says the default should be that you don't have them, right?
Yeah.
The default should be that you don't
that.
have them because it is a really big, and I also think this is a difference, right? When my grandmother made the decision, actually she didn't make the decision. She didn't have access to contraception. She had 7 kids. She had kids until she couldn't have kids anymore. Ooh. When she had kids, she had no sense that of the responsibility or that like, oh my God, I could really fuck them up. Like, I don't think that she had a sense of, in the way that we do now, where parenting is the most important, practical, you know how we say that parenting has gone from being a noun to a verb or whatever.
Yeah. We've made if you're like now the anxiety is higher because it's like if I'm going to do it, I've got to do it really,
I've got to
really
be the best parent.
I've got to be the best at it, and I've got to be perfect at it, and it's really
I've got
hard
to read
to
a
be
lot of
perfect
books.
at it. Yeah, and
got to announce it well on Instagram.
TBH, it's impossible to be perfect at it.
Oh, speak for yourself.
But I think as well that what's changed in the decision-making process is the technologies. And comparing myself with my grandmother, obviously, you know, you spend probably at least 10 years on some sort of contraception that stops you from having kids. And then you enter a new phase where you now have access to new technologies that mean that at least perceivably you can extend your fertility window, which is maybe egg freezing or IVF or whatever it is. For some people that doesn't work. But there is an illusion of control that we have that my grandmother didn't. And this is compounded.
You've got more options, don't you?
Yes. And it's compounded by the fact that the other thing my grandmother didn't have was an open window to all people currently parenting.
Yes.
Right?
That's so
true.
Yes.
I have, through social media, through like TikTok, through even my mates, right? It's like messy houses and sick babies who don't sleep, and women are crying on TikTok saying, I regret this,
Stress
don't do it.
work.
Parents are saying it's like having your heart ripped out and wearing it on the outside, and everyone is always in hospital.
Say that all the time.
What a grommets, because everyone has them. And you can't go back to work because your kid is constantly sick from
or
daycare.
you do go back to work, but you feel massively guilty that you're constantly calling in with saying my kid's homesick from daycare.
Yeah, so you just feel like shit all the time. And then you envy your mates who didn't have kids, which is me now.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, do you though? Or do you look at them and go, I don't know, whatever life stage I'm in, I look at everybody else's life and go, oh, I'm glad I'm not in that stage.
see, I do the opposite. I do the complete opposite.
I loved your story about this, Mia. Well, quick digression. I loved your story about this. You wrote a subscriber piece this week where you wrote about seasons, which we've discussed before, and you just spent like 3 hours with your friend Amelia Lester and her 2 tiny children, and you were basically like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I was feeling so nostalgic.
forgotten.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I really am so sad my children have grown up. And then I'm like, maybe I'll just drink a cup of tea quietly and look at my phone while you chase the small children around.
But don't you two, aren't you? I don't know how anyone ever made the decision.
Yeah. Well, I didn't. I just got pregnant by accident. I highly recommend it. No, I'm being facetious. But, well, firstly, I am too impulsive, you know. I'm very
you don't
impulsive.
stew on decisions.
But I also didn't get the chance to have the life that you're talking about having to give up. So I think that that's an advantage of having kids younger, that I didn't have anything to give up because I was only 25. And I'd done
you
my
weren't set
partying.
in your ways.
I wasn't set in my ways. You know, in hindsight, gosh, it would have been nice if Jason and I could have had a holiday together maybe before we had a baby. Like, I don't recommend it because our marriage fell apart, you know, within 2 years after having Luca because we did it all before we were ready. But I don't think that's necessarily about, I don't think we were ready in our relationship to have children, but it was never a question to me about whether I would have children or not.
I think it's interesting because you have to put on the table that for a lot of people this isn't a choice, right? It isn't a choice because it's not available to them.
The choice is a luxury.
Yes, and also the timing is not always a choice either. You know, you haven't met the right person, you don't want to do it by yourself. Like, all of those things are very, very true. But I don't necessarily think it's new that women are having this conversation. I think what's new is that what you're saying is that window, because I actually think that for a lot of Gen Xers, certainly Gen Xers in my life, because we were the first generation to broadly leave it later and later. Like the age for women to have their first child has been creeping up, and it was our generation who pushed it pretty far. A reaction to that, obviously, has been a lot of the development of the technologies that are out there now. And I did not have my first baby till I was 38. So that's late, right?
Did you ever think of not having
lived
them?
a lot of life. Well, I had got to a point, because this is my experience of all my friends who were in similar situations. Some people knew that they didn't want to have kids. Some people, I mean, obviously some people had kids, right? And then, I know this statistic surprises you, but anecdotally, when I was a young woman, I lived in a share house with 6 girls, and 4 of them remain really good friends of mine. Of those 6 women who were all exactly the same age when we did that, half of them are mothers and half of them are not. An exact 50-50 split, right? And now we're all 50, so that the decisions have been made.
Correct.
And I also have quite a lot of friends here who are of my age who don't have kids. It's not unusual in my world that people don't have kids. And some of those were deliberate decisions. Some of them were the clock ran down. Some of them were we would have liked to, but it didn't happen. You know, like, so there's a million different colors of this decision. And we did talk about it a lot. For my own experience is I was not the person who always wanted to have children since I was little. I was not one of those women who runs towards a newborn baby, who was like, this is something I have to do. I was not that person. I didn't really know for sure that I did want to have kids until I met somebody that I really wanted to have kids with. And I was at a stage in my life. I am a massive believer in when your light's on, your light's on. You know what I mean? As in you've arrived at a point where you're like, okay, now I know I want to do that. When I was 25, I didn't know I wanted to do that. In fact, I couldn't have thought of anything worse. So there's just an element of let's see that I think is entirely unacceptable to us now in the life we live, where there's no let's see on anything. Everything is
certainty.
There's certainty, controlled, on demand. When I want to do it, I watch the thing when I want to watch it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this like a crotchety old lady going, oh my God, nobody knows what it is to wait for anything anymore. I just mean literally that's how the world is. So the let's see element and the let's see what happens element is kind of gone. So this leaves you with this big do I, don't I? I would put money on the fact that Ryan Shelton and his girlfriend are going to have children in 5 years' time.
Really?
I would absolutely put money on it.
I think what Ryan Shelton spoke to as well is that a lot of us are waiting for a feeling.
Yes. And sometimes that feeling comes and sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes it doesn't. And some people say it doesn't come till the baby's in your arms. And some people say I had the baby and the feeling still didn't come. And there's so many unknowns about that. And again, in generations past, they weren't waiting for a feeling, but the result of that was that, and I think we can agree, there are a lot of women and a lot of men who had kids that shouldn't have.
Exactly. So that's my position. I don't think the default that everyone should just have them in case they regret it is a good position, because I think that you should only have children if you really want to.
And I shouldn't be flip. When I said to Ryan, get the splinters out of your ass and have a baby, I did listen to everything he said, and I was listening to what his concerns were, and they were all round the edges concerns. They were not at the heart of who I know him to be. I'm not very close to him, but, you know, I don't think they were... I don't think they were.
There are some things that you worry about that are really worth worrying about, like how am I going to make my living? How am I going to actualize myself? Or blah, blah, blah. But there are other things like I won't be able to go for a coffee on a Saturday morning.
And that was at the heart of his reticence.
I don't mean to discount that, because I remember a phase of intense early parenting when I would have killed someone to be able to go and have a coffee on a Saturday morning. So I'm not diminishing the freedom, but ultimately on balance, that's nothing compared to, I agree with Mia that my life is big, messy, loud, chaotic, but it's better.